It is 11:01. Let me call the other Post-Employment Benefits Trustees Committee meeting to order. So a couple housekeeping items, since this is our first physical board meeting in a long time. To speak, you'll need to hit the button with the picture of the person breathing. Right, there you go. And then the mics will, that'll pick up, the recording will pick that up so that we can take minutes more easily. When you make a motion, if you can indicate your name and motion, same with when you second, if you can indicate the name, your name. So again, the mic picks it up and then Val can take minutes easier. So with that, I think we're ready to begin our meeting. Val, would you like to take roll?
Fran McGregor,
Present.
Mary Lamont,
Present.
Jeff Kirst.
Present.
Thank you. Also present, Robbie Carson, Mark Mathers, and our new controller, Jessica Young.
Very good. Item 1.03 on the agenda is public comment. When we ever get public comment, that'll be a blue ribbon day. So seeing no public comment, we'll move on to item number 1.04, action to adopt the agenda. There are a couple items on this agenda where we had late-breaking information, and I thought it would be a little unfair to drop some of the documents on you Friday afternoon, so you had to read them this weekend. So we will not review documents on items 2.06 and 2.09. So this is going to make this meeting really quick, and I'm sorry to bring you in, but I just thought it was a little unfair to drop some of those heavy-duty documents on you like that. But with that, I will take a motion to adopt the agenda.
Fran McGregor for the record. We move the agenda.
Thank you, and I'll take a second.
Sorry. Mary Lamont, second.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those in opposition? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. So item 2.01 is for possible action. That is discussion and possible action to accept the Opeb budget for fiscal year 22 as previously adopted by the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees as part of the approval of the district's final budget for fiscal year 2022. With that, I will turn it over to Robbie.
Thank you, Mark. Robert Carson for the record. So tab 2.01 in your packet is a copy of the approved final budget by the Board of Trustees. So you have 4 different columns in there, and column 4 is what we're really looking at. You'll see it's broken out by additions and deductions, and then you have a net increase or decrease that we're budgeting for. Everybody on that page?
It's before all the pages. It's like the very first page after the very first tab.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's
2.01.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
not to the tabs. You're going too far. There you go.
So kind of expand on this, this is an action the OPEB trust does need to take per NRS requirements. The additions here are largely the investment earnings of the trust. And so you can see estimated beginning assets as of July 1 at the bottom were $73.5 million. So those returns are based on the assumed return for the Rbif fund. And so those do total to slightly less than $7 million. We do have $2 million of contributions by the district in there as well. So 2 million of the 7 million is contributions, and then roughly 5 million are investment returns. Do you see that? Okay. And then the benefits, we somewhat over budget here for benefit payments out. And those would include the payments out of the trust for PEB, retiree medical, and then the life insurance subsidy. And that totals that $6.3 million that you see under deductions. And so there's a net budgeted increase of $664,000. Do you see that? So that'll depend obviously on our actual returns for fiscal year 22, which we don't know. That'll depend, right, largely on the bond market and what happens there, and the stock market and what happens there over the next year. So we'll, I think, over the course of the next several meetings, kind of get into how we're starting to look at the budget of the Opeb trust and the interplay between the Opeb trust and the health insurance fund of the district, right? But the bottom line is, I guess for the purposes of this discussion, ideally, we don't want to make any net withdrawals out of the trust if we can. We would like to see investment earnings at least equal what we draw out on an annual basis out of the trust. And so we've kind of, we'll monitor that through the year, and we'll come to you, we'll come to you for approval of disbursements out of the trust next meeting. So that's another action the trust has to take. So the first action is you approve the budget, and then that next action would be to approve any disbursements for fiscal year 22. And over the course of the year, Robbie's going to present to you financial statements to show you what's happening, what's occurring each quarter of the fiscal year. But basically, we would prefer not to ever draw down on the OPEB trust balance if we can help it. And again, there's an interplay between this trust, the health insurance fund, and so it's there's different considerations that come into play, but like I say, in an ideal world, we want this trust fund's balance to build over time. And at least that's how it's budgeted. But again, have to see what happens in those markets to know what we have to spend. Yes, sir, Mr. Kirst.
Jeff Kirst, in reviewing the documents before our meeting, I noted that the tentative approved of the deductions was $1 million, and then it went up to almost $7 million. I just wondered if that could be explained to me a little bit better.
So Robert Carson for the record. On that one, when the initial budget happened over the last couple of years, we haven't been making payments for the PEB portion of the retiree benefit or the retiree medical portion. So it showed as a zero balance. So the initial budget was put together, or the tentative budget was put together without those amounts in it. And then we reviewed and made a change for the final budget. So we had the authority, if it came to it, that we could withdraw those funds from the trust to reimburse.
Thank you.
So I'll just add to that a little as well. So state laws regarding local government budgets are pretty restrictive. If you don't allow yourself the ability to pay for a cost, it is very difficult to augment your budget later after approval of the budget to allow for those expenditures. So we want to kind of pre-budget for those costs in case we need to pay those. The hope is that we don't, that the health insurance fund won't need that assistance, if you will, out of the OPEB trust. But again, we've got to set that up at the beginning of the year because it's just very hard to make budget changes or augmentations once you have a finalized budget. hopefully over the next several meetings, this will become clearer to you how this all works. Again, we thought we'd take it lightly here at the first meeting, what we've had in a while, a physical meeting, but, if you have questions, certainly you can ask them now, or, as we get into it over the next several meetings, I think you'll have more questions, and that's fine, because we know this is all new to you. So unless there are any other questions, I'll entertain a motion to adopt this budget for fiscal year '22.
Fran McGregor for the record.
Jeff Kirst for the record, I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll take all those in favor of approval of the fiscal year '22 budget for the Opeb Trust, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda are approval of the minutes of the January 28th, 2021 Opeb meeting. I do have one correction, maybe Fran already caught this, but under item 1.02 roll call, I think we need to indicate that Fran McGregor was present, in addition to myself and Gordon, who's since had to leave the committee. So that would be my one modification to the agenda minutes. To clarify, council has indicated that upon Fran and my indication that the minutes are accurate, that those present may vote to approve the minutes. Otherwise, we don't have a majority to approve the minutes. So, Fran, did you have any other changes, or anybody else have any changes to the minutes?
Fran McGregor, no, I have no changes.
Okay. Since the other two members weren't here, they probably don't have any changes to the minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 28th, 2021.
Fran McGregor for the record, I move that we approve the minutes from the January meeting.
Very good. This is Mark Mathers. I will second that motion. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. So now we get on to the fun stuff. Item 2.03 is selection of the chair of this committee for fiscal year '22, the fiscal year beginning on July 1st. There's 4 of us that can be nominated. I think the way this works is someone makes a nomination, and then we vote on it, and if the majority of members approve that, then we have a chair and so forth. I will entertain a nomination for chair.
Jeff Kirst for the record, I would propose that Mr. Mark Mathers be the chair of the OPEB committee.
Fran McGregor, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll just say, Jeff, I'll get back at you for that, but that's okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none. Motion passes. I will be the chair for next fiscal year. So now we go to agenda item 2.04 for nominations for vice chair of the committee. I will entertain a motion to nominate a vice chair.
Jeff Kirst for the record, I would propose that Fran McGregor be the vice chair for the OPEB committee.
Fran is the most seasoned veteran on this committee after me, with having one whole meeting.
Via Zoom.
Yes. Do I have a second?
Mary Lamont, I second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously to appoint Fran McGregor as Vice Chair of the committee for next fiscal year. Very good. So as noted, 2.0, I'm sorry, no, 2.05 is our financial statements for the period ending December 30th of 2020 and March 31st of 2021. This is for information and discussion only.
So Robert Carson for the record, and it is for the periods ended December 31st, that was a typo on there, and March 31st. So you have the second and third quarter of our fiscal year financials. And it starts on tab 2.05. So what we do on this agenda item is we'll present a comparative balance sheet year over year, and then we'll present an income statement for the periods ended those quarter dates, and then we'll also show you the Rbif performance for the quarters ending. So it'll give you a real good feel about where our fund balance stands. Excuse me. There's a lot of information, so I was just going to stick to the March 31st discussion, and if you have any questions on what you saw on December 31st, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So if we start on that first page, it'll say comparative statement of net position as of March 31st, 2021 and 2020. And so that's our balance statement for the Opeb Trust. You can see our total assets as of 2021, March 31st, 2021, we have $76 million in there. And compare that to the year previous, we have, $54.5 million. So our fund has grown tremendously over the last year, which is good news. And there is a little accounts payable in there this year. So you can see the total net position as of March 31st. They don't change a lot because we don't have a lot of liabilities running through this fund. Normally it's just small amounts. So whatever assets we have generally end up being our net position for that. So we have any questions on those two numbers, and we can go to see the transactional data that's gone through there. Okay. So if we flip over to the next page, it'll be the statement of revenues, expenditures, and change in net position for the periods ended March 31st, 2021 and 2020. So on this statement, we have it broken out between revenues and expenditures. The first column is the approved FY21 budget. The second column is the actuals for March 31st, 2021. And then we have a variance to the final budget, so we're showing how we're doing versus the budgeted amounts. And then we have the actual information for the year prior, and then we have a variance between the current year and the previous year. So a lot of information on there, and if you have any questions, just holler at me. So the big highlights in the revenues are the just under $1.6 million in realized gains and the $10.2 million unrealized gains. So that's really what's boosted up our fund balance, is the performance in the stock markets and the investments that we have. All of our money's invested with Rbif, and the returns have been just astronomical. It's been pretty crazy. And if you compare that to the previous year, we were showing a $5.5 million unrealized loss, and most of that was attributed to the pandemic and things starting to slow down. So we're showing a loss at that point last year. So it's a big turnaround in where we're at. Under expenses, you'll see there aren't that many expenses this year. We have just about $750,000 worth of expenses out of the trust this year versus $2.5 million the year previous. And so what this was, there was a change, and our PEB portion was paid directly out of the trust to the state in years prior. And then in the current fiscal year, we've been paying it out of our health insurance fund. And if we decide to reimburse out of the trust, we will do that. So we're not showing any expenses in there this year for that portion, so that's the biggest difference in there. And again, you'll have the net position as of, that should say as of March 31st, not June 30th. Thought I caught that. You'll see the $76 million for the current year and the $54.5 million. That'll tie to the previous statement that we discussed.
So there's there's actually a fair amount to go through here. I'll point out a couple things. So again, if you look at the expenditures, we budgeted 5.99 million of expenditures. So this goes back to Mr. Kearse's question, right? What are we doing budgeting, why did we increase the budget for 22? Well, for 21, we had 5.99 budgeted. But you can see we haven't spent anything, as Robbie said, for PEB expenditures or retiree medical. So again, this was intentional in that we didn't have to spend those monies. And again, the intention, in a best possible world is that we're building the fund balance of the trust fund, right? And so that's why when you compare budget against expenses through March 31, there's a big difference there, right? And that's, that's a good thing, right? If you go above and look at revenues, as Robbie said, going back to this period of time, the stock market was going crazy, right? And so we'll get into our investments here in a little bit. But, we don't expect the stock market to show those kind of returns every year. That's for darn sure. So I guess we'll hold off on a discussion of investments until Robbie goes through the Rbif report. But obviously, this was, a great period for us. We want to build up assets. To the extent we build up assets, it helps the district's general fund as well, right? So whatever assets we build up in the Opeb trust over time, in the long term, would relieve the general fund of having to pay those costs. So I just wanted to point those few things out.
All right. So do we have any questions on that statement?
Jeff Kirst for the record. Just what exactly does PEBP stand for?
So that is the state of Nevada's OPEB plan, and it stands for Public Employees Benefit Program. So up until 2008, I believe, all outside agencies were eligible to enroll in the state's PEB plan, and then they closed it. So we still have employees or former employees with the district that are on that plan, so we have to pay the state their portion of it. All right. I think we're safe to move on to the next page. So the next page, and it should say summary of changes to Wcsd Rbif account for the periods ended March 31st, 2021 and 2020. And this is just summary information of our investments. So all of our money is invested, well, the majority of our money is invested with the state of Nevada Retirement Benefits Fund. And it's pooled together with all other localities that want to invest in there. So it's a very large pool of money with a lot of investment power. So this just summarizes our portion of that. You can see the net assets at the beginning of the period. We started with 73 million, and then we had a little over $2 million of gains for that period. So that's just March 1st through March 31st. The next column over is our year-to-date column. So this goes from 7/1 through March 31st. Our net assets at the beginning were $60 million, and so far through the year we've made almost $13 million in investment gains, giving us the fund balance of the $75 million. And if you compare that to March 31st in the investments, we had lost just under $5 million for the year, and most of that was unrealized losses that we had. And then for the year, we were down $3.5 million. So it's showing great growth in there. The investments are doing well, and as Mark alluded to, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But that's just a summary of our portion of that investment. If we have no questions on that one, I'm going to have you flip ahead 4 pages. And so the next few pages are for the period ended December 31st, which, if you have any questions on those, please feel free to ask. If not, we'll jump forward to the investment performance. So this report is produced by the state of Nevada, their Rbif fund, and it just shows their performance. So it shows their asset classes, and we're invested in U.S. stocks, international stocks, and U.S. bonds. And then it's got a target allocation in there. No, sorry. It's got the total market value for the Rbif fund. As you can see, it's $730 million in that pool, and we have a chunk of that. Their target allocation, they're pretty good about sticking to that, so they try and do 50% in U.S. stocks, 21.5% in international stocks, and then 28% in U.S. bonds. And then you have their actual allocation, and like I said, they're pretty good at sticking to it and reviewing their investments, so they stick close to those. The big one is a fiscal year-to-date return that they have. For the total Rbif fund, they're showing a fiscal year-to-date return of almost 21%. So that's where our $12 million comes from in the growth. The 1 year, so that would have been from April 1st through March 31st, they're showing a 37% return. And then you have 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. So it just gives you a snapshot of those pooled monies and how they're invested and how the investments are performing.
If there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. Just to, again, expand on it a little bit. The Retirement Benefits Investment Fund is similar to the Nevada PERS asset allocation. There are a few asset classes PERS can be in that Rbif cannot. But it's very similar. It's a pretty simple asset allocation. These are passively managed, so Rbif is in some very low expense ratio passive investment vehicles. If you're ever interested, Nevada PERS staff who manages the Rbif fund has come in here and presented information to our committee. We are one of the largest investors in Rbif. Roughly 10% of the total is our funds. And so they're happy to do that if you'd like any information. Well, again, this will just be a recurring theme for the committee, but certainly one of the responsibilities of the committee is the management of the funds in the trust. Local agencies, as Robbie mentioned, with Opeb trusts can utilize Rbif, but they don't have to. And so if it ever came about that this committee felt like that asset allocation wasn't to their liking, they've seen strong stock returns, they're concerned about a pullback, so forth, and they want to go into fixed income exclusively, whatever the reason may be, this committee does have that authority to make those decisions. If, however, they were to go out of Rbif and want to diverge from Rbif investments, we would have to hire an investment advisor who then would work with the committee to construct, an asset allocation and make investments. So, this is probably fairly dry, but hopefully the return here is kind of interesting to you. Mm-hmm. Don't expect that every year or every quarter, that's for darn sure. But I just, wanted to kind of give you that background that this, again, is one of the responsibilities and authorities of this committee is investment decisions while these funds sit with the committee. So obviously great year. We have a long-term investment horizon, right? We're providing benefits for retirees who hopefully live a long, long time. So it makes sense to kind of have that long-term investment horizon when we think about investments, but still, there may come a day where, the committee wants to explore that, and that's totally within its powers to do that. So any questions, we'll be happy to try to answer them for you. Okay, I think that, Robbie, is for just information and discussion only, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So item 2.06 was going to be a presentation on the financial statements for the Opeb Trust for the fiscal year ended June 30th of 2019 and June 30th of 2020. That looks pretty old, and it is. Part of the reason why those are a little bit older was some issues working with a prior external auditor. And then we've engaged a new external auditor, Crow LLC. And so we've been working with them, and those financial statements are actually will be finalized or have been recently finalized. So we'll go over them next board committee meeting. So we don't have anything to report there for you. If you thought this was a dry packet, wait till you see those financial statements. But there's some good stuff in there that we'll point out to you when we go over it. But you will get those shortly for a future meeting. Okay, item 2.07, I'm not going to try to explain this, but Mr. Carson can.
Thank you, Mark. Robert Carson for the record. So item 2.07 is also a dry topic. It's the IRS Form 990, which we're required to fill out annually. And in a nutshell, what it is we're sending information about the trust to the IRS. We're sending them our fund balance, any investment earnings, any compensation paid to committee members, anything like that. And what the IRS is doing is just ensuring that we're still eligible for our tax exempt status for the trust. So it really is just an information piece. It's prepared by our external auditors after we close the fiscal year. And then we just send it to them and everything's fine and dandy. So there's really not a lot to it. It's just an informational piece so you guys are aware that we're sending this to the IRS so we can keep the tax exempt status.
Jeff Kirst for the record. A question. When I went through the documents before coming to the meeting and looked at the tax return, it was, they applied for an extension, I believe, and it was filed March 4th, 2021. When do they actually, and what was with your new auditor? I just wondered what the timing is. When do we wrap up the years? Is that the end of June?
Yeah, so our fiscal year ends June 30th. We were waiting for the audited financials to go through. I believe the filing deadline's the 31st of January. And so we didn't have FY20's financials fully audited by that point, so they applied for the extension so we didn't have to go back and refile an amended tax return with updated numbers. So that's why we were granted the extension for that.
Thank you.
So this is Mark Mathers. I guess there is wording here in this agenda item about a conflict of interest, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always kind of been moot for us. I suppose the conflict of interest would arise if we had an external investment manager, and one of you, had ownership in that company or something like that, which wouldn't happen, of course, but that would be the occasion where, there would need to be a disclosure and discussion, and that would be problematic for you to vote on any agenda items for that matter. But since we're investing in a public entity, Rbif, we don't have those issues, obviously. So that was for information and discussion only. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Kirst, for your research and questions. Appreciate it. Let's see, we're on to agenda item 2.08. I'll let Robbie take this one over too.
Thank you. So Robert Carson for the record again. This is just an annual affirmation that we do that states that all interest earned by the trust for their investments will be used for the benefit of retirees that are part of this trust. It's stating that these funds can't be used to go back to the district to pay or to close any gaps or anything like that. It's for the sole benefit of the beneficiaries of the trust. So it is for possible action, and you guys will have to make a motion and vote and say that these funds will go to the trust only and not be used by the district in any other way.
Thank you, Robbie. Do I have a motion?
Jeff Kirst, for the record, I make a motion that these funds will only be used for the trust and not go to the district.
Fran McGregor, I second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. So we are on to item 2.09. We also chose not to present you with an item here as we work through some issues. So we don't have anything to report to you and no possible action needed for 2.09, I don't believe. Okay. So we are on to closing items. Item 3.01 is our closing public comment. I usually skip that over and Val has to remind me, so any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3.02, the announcement of the next meeting. We have it scheduled for a balmy August 26, 21. Hopefully we'll all be able to make it, and fires or whatever won't be happening, and we'll all be able to get here. Does that work for your schedules?
Fran McGregor, I'm looking at a possible hip replacement here shortly. It's taken me a little time to even see the surgeon. I think things have been backed up. I see him on the 15th of July, so I'll have a better idea of where I'll be at that point.
Okay, and just to clarify, committee members can call in if necessary or if desired. So that is an option. Okay.
Jeff
Yes.
Kirst, for the record, 3:30 time, I anticipate being able to be here. However, I am a school teacher. School will be back in session. School is out at 3, and then teachers are there till 3:15, but I believe I should be here on time.
Very good. Mary, you good?
Mary Lamont, I'm good to go.
Okay, great. So at that point, we'll have the financials for the last 2 fiscal years for us to look over and a number of other items. I'll take this opportunity on 3.02 to ask if committee members have any particular items of interest they'd like to bring up, future agenda items that you'd like to see. I know you're all new. Hopefully, again, this will start to make sense to you after a certain point. But if there was anything, that would be good for staff to know. Okay. All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you.